As part of this month's Miracle or Two monthly marquee, we're spotlighting The Ark, a bold and uplifting musical by Michael McLean. With a joyful score blending pop and gospel and a heartfelt message about family and love, The Ark remains a timeless story through a modern lens and puts the audience right in the middle of the storm. We sat down with Michael to talk about the inspiration, the music, and what keeps this musical resonating with audiences of all ages. Hello, Michael McLean. It is so great to see you.
Good to see you, Ray. Been too long.
It's been way too long, but boy, I would be looking forward to chatting with you for, oh gosh, so long. And I'm so glad you could make this work. You're a busy guy, and we appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
So we're going to first start talking about, well, all things Michael McLean for sure. But let's talk about our first connection together, which is a wonderful musical, absolutely beautiful musical called The Ark. Can you tell us a little bit about what the show's all about? Because I can do it. But I want Michael McLean to do it.
No, years ago, I was working at an ad agency, and one of my colleagues there, great friend, Kevin Kelly, he came to me and he said, Michael, you're a songwriter. I got a great idea for a musical. And he had a ton of kids. He had, I think, 9 kids. And Lynn and I had 3. And he said, let's do a great show for our kids. I said, what's the idea? He says, the theater is Noah's Ark, and the audience
the audience are the animals.
I said, the audience are the animals. And the very first time we ever tried to do it, it was an hour long. The show was an hour long. I think by the time we met you, we'd been working on it for 20 years almost. Yeah. And initially, we had all these kids, and they were just adorable. And there was this little tiny theater, held 90 people, that was kind of an addendum to a famous theater downtown Salt Lake. And we said, why don't we bring everybody to the theater, and we'll have the inside of the theater be you just sit on bales of hay. It looked like stalls. And the opening number would be, the family would come out and look out the door, and all the animals are waiting to get on the ark. And the opening number, which we didn't use in the version we worked on together, was called Waddle and a Wiggle. And it was Waddle and a Wiggle, rough and tough, giggle and a jiggle, strut your stuff. And the opening number was putting kids in their stalls and defining what kind of animals they were. And then as the story went on, Noah and the family are trying to connect with all these kids. And we're parents with young kids, and we want to kind of give them some songs that they could say that maybe you should believe in each other, maybe you should be kind, and maybe you should believe in God doing miracles. But it was focused on, we wanted some cute songs that would delight our kids, and they'd be in. And we even sometimes had face painters, that would kind of do little face painting. So we started working on it, and then Kevin got a job with Ogilvy and Mather and went to first Chicago and then to New York. And so he's in New York, and we keep writing back and forth this show, and it keeps evolving. It goes from, we just had one act, and the act was, you're about to drown, get on the ark, hold on, the light will come, end of show. That was it. And then I said, well, why don't we expand it? Because our kids are getting older. Right. And what if this show is just an excuse to talk about how do families learn to love each other? How do we, we think we're getting on board Noah's Ark to be saved, but we don't get off Noah's Ark until we've changed. And so how can we bridge that and make it happen? And I just can't stop myself writing songs. So we just get a premise, and then Kevin would get an idea, back and forth. And then we did a little version at Tuckahoe High School, and we got everybody in the show. We had like 50 kids in the show, all dressed as animals. And so we got a chance to have them sitting in the audience like as the animal. So it just kept growing and kept growing and kept growing. And I had a fan base that liked my music. and I was selling a lot of records at the time. And for you younger kids that may be listening, you can Google this up. We sold a thing called cassettes and and CDs. And so we decided that we were going to do a version of the Ark here in Utah, where I had a lot of fans. And we did that, and that soundtrack, Kevin got us into the ASCAP musical theater workshop with Stephen Schwartz. And so Stephen invites Kevin and I with the guy who wrote Gentleman's Guide, who's a good friend of Joe Baker's, Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, wins all these Tonys, and a bunch of others. And he said, let's work on your show. He said, because I just did a show called Children of Eden. Act 2 for Stephen was all about Noah's Ark. And Stephen said, initially I thought maybe this isn't a good idea. And then I thought, why not? Because he loved the soundtrack. He really loved the soundtrack. And you'd heard some of those early songs. Oh, yeah. And we made it sound good. So we got to go to do 9 weeks with Stephen Schwartz. And you know how those things work. There's 200 or 300 people, and they bring in legends to sing the songs and Lucy, who wrote Secret Garden, and the guy, Jerry Bach. And I mean, these are genius people, and they're basically going to beat you up. You're going to get beat up by really smart people about your show. And so we're getting beat up. And then Stephen said, let's do something we've never done before. Let's do, Michael, you and I, dueling pianos. What do you mean? He said, well, I'll sing my songs from Children of Eden and at the piano, and then you give your take on that same story. Oh, wow. And we'll just go back and forth. So here is legendary, and I adore this man who's been so kind to me, but Stephen Schwartz, Michael McLean, he plays his songs, sings them. I play my songs from the Ark and sing them. And at the end of this 45-minute set of dueling pianos, it's clear why Oscar-winning genius Stephen Schwartz is Stephen Schwartz. And I'm kind of this jingle writer out in Utah, doing his thing.
Yeah, I've got to step in here. You are your own brand of genius, my friend.
Well,
you're also very thoughtful and kind and self-deprecating, but you are a genius.
Well, but here's the thing. The part of the story that I love, because it changed my life, is we finished the set, and everybody's having wine and cheese, and I just can't believe. I mean, I graduated from high school in Bergen County, Jersey, across the river. This was my dream, to just be on Broadway, and there I was on Broadway in this little room. And a guy comes up to me afterwards during the break and said, "Can I talk to you, kid?" Yeah. Pushes me to the corner so no one would hear this conversation. He said, "You can't sing. You really can't sing." And I said, well, I get that, and Stephen isn't a singer either. And tonight was not about great singers. And he says, no, you really can't sing. And I said, I really heard you the first time. And then he said this, and Ray, literally, it changed my life. So he said, so I got a question for you. I've been coming to these workshops here, and Broadway's best singers come and sing the new works. So what was I feeling when you, the non-singer, were singing your song that I don't feel when great singers sing the songs? And I wept. And then he got carried away and went somewhere else. What he was teaching me is I've been always convinced with my limitations that my authentic, this is who I am self was never going to be enough. And he was telling me something happens when you are that guy who can't traditionally sing, but sing something that's so part of you that it translated to me in that setting. And because somebody as gracious and as wonderful as Stephen was, we were able to start seeing new possibilities for the Ark. we started doing rewrites and tried different possibilities, and then got invited to be in NAMM, as the National Alliance for Musical Theater. So we came back into the year 2000, a couple of years after we'd worked with Stephen, and we did that. And then the Village Theater out in Seattle, great theater, said we'd like to take that on. And then I got to have Brian Yorkey, famous for Next to Normal, Pulitzer Prize winning Brian Yorkey, was the dramaturg for Kevin and I on that show, and it came a long ways. And then Karen Goodwin and Eric found you, and then we took it to the next level.
Well, you said something, I think, that maybe the most important thing. You said a lot of beautiful, important things, and that journey is remarkable. With everyone kind of responding, I think, for the same reason, I mean, I think back that I did, was your authenticity for the story and understanding of what mattered about telling this story. And that you said you learned this valuable lesson that I think we all kind of have to learn, just regardless of what we do, but to trust being yourself and how much more powerful that is as opposed to imposing something else on it. And I think the stories and all the stories you write, but particularly the arc, is so imaginative. It's so theatrically extraordinary. From just the concept, to start with the concept of, and this is what I fell in love with, and you talked about it, the audience are the animals, and the rest are human beings, the family that have to figure out, like you said, how to love each other in this environment where they're taking care of a bunch of animals, right? That's the other side of it. They have to let go of themselves and love where they are and who they're with. It's a brilliant story because it's really, yes, it's the story of Noah's Ark, but really it's so much more, I think, in terms of speaking to us today as anybody, any of us who all have families.
I almost called you, Ray, during COVID because everybody was living the ark. We were all shut in. And I live in a big house, and we've had three families, this big log cabin in Utah, and we've had three families living together a lot. And so I was experiencing what's it like when three different women are trying to decide whose house is this? And how are we going to manage dinner tonight? And when are we getting too involved in everybody's life? And when are we, I mean, it was like I was living the ark. And then
really, I never thought about that, Michael, but that is really, talk about, the perfect analogy, right? Is literally what we all what all of us went through. And what even if it's just you and your spouse,
sure,
all of a sudden you're trapped together. Now we've got to figure it out for real. We can't avoid it, whatever that is. It is a stunning story. And I think, when we did it in New York, it was in a brand new theater off Broadway and all of that. But boy, the people that did get there to see this show off Broadway adored it. And I still hear about it, all the time. It really impacted people's lives in the way that it's supposed to. And it is very universal, this storytelling, very universal.
And of course, everybody, when they're writing a story based on the Old Testament, wants to be Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. We want everybody to flood to see this. And I think one of the gifts was, I thought, everybody was disappointed that the show didn't last longer and didn't find its crowd. And that was the year Katrina kind of sank the ark, because funding came along and we lost a whole bunch of that money. But a couple of years after that, for me, what was a trauma of, I thought this was my destiny. I thought I had so much fun playing in that sandbox with you and Joe and Jim. It was like, I get to be here. The extraordinary joy of the process almost compensated for the fact that it didn't turn out the way I thought I wanted it to. And yet, here's what I learned, Ray. I wasn't writing it to be the next, Pasek and Paul. I was writing because I needed to write it. My
Yeah.
family needed this experience, and it prepared me for what had happened with my kids who had all been in various versions of the arc all along. And I didn't know those songs, particularly something like Hold On, the Light Will Come,
Yeah.
40 years later, would be transformative for me. So it's not just about the arc for me, it's feeling like the universe kind of said, I want you to get something out of you that you won't even know while you're writing it, who it can reach and how it can reach them. Oh man, it was great.
Well, and because you have a need to write and you're writing your truth, do you know what that delivers to everybody else? It delivers their truth because we all share. We just all can't find a way to express it. And you express these truths and these in such, I'm going to say this, your writing, it's so skilled because I think it's, I don't know if you think about it or not, but everything you write pulls you in immediately with this simple little conflict that we all understand. And then somehow this journey you spin takes us where we had no idea we would be going. And we're so thrilled to be there. And we've come out the other side a better human than we started. I mean it. That is really what it's about in what we do as artists. And you do it with a song, you do it with a scene, you do it with a musical, you do it with a play. It doesn't matter. That's what you do. I think it's instinctive. And your ability to connect with the every human being in a universal way is beyond. And I think your career reflects that.
Well, thank you. But I also have to tell you that you and Joe taught me something that I have included in everything, because I got 9 or 10 of those musicals that I would like to get recorded before I'm dead,
Maybe you should do
that
it.
all have great meaning. But I remember when we were cutting a verse and part of a chorus of Whenever He Needs a Miracle. And this was, oh my gosh, I thought, from God's mouth to my ear, this is the best song I've ever written. And I said, so I was saying to you and Joe, I'm saying, why are we cutting this? This is the best song I've ever written. I do concerts, people go nuts for this song. And you and Joe, I don't remember who said it first, said, I'm sure that it is the best song. But in this show, nothing is more important than everything. What? No, that little moment that you are so proud of. Hey, everybody, look at me. I write really great songs. It doesn't, that single moment, nothing about that is more important than the full on impact of the total show.
Yeah.
So trust that we are setting up the ultimate message and that you may have to sacrifice your ego. You didn't say it this way, but I interpreted it. Don't let your ego get in the way of diminishing the power of what you're trying to say because it's the best thing you ever did. Because it probably is, Michael, but this show gets, and I remember the first night, and we were in previews, that I heard Whenever He Needs a Miracle without my precious verse, extra verse, and chorus. That was so brilliant. And I watched people respond, and I thought, damn, they're right. It
Well,
was a
also,
great
yeah,
lesson.
it's sometimes those numbers that are heading towards the end of the show, um, you've done so much good work getting there that you don't need to say as much as we think we need said. The audience
Exactly.
is the audience is getting it. They're with us, but that's part of being a good writer is that once you tee some things up by all this work you do, boy, you can almost do anything you want to do in a way, and it works, and you keep that rhythm going, which I think was part of that. But I also just think, you know, you're you are such a strong emotional writer that it happens very quickly with your audiences. I mean, I've seen it even with Forgotten Carols. How quickly I'm hooked. I'm feeling it. I mean, I'm literally crying because it's so beautiful and so quickly because I get it. It's like Irving Berlin to me. Irving Berlin can write, you're like you write just the truth, and you're not afraid of the truth. Oh, will I not look smart enough? Will I not look, you know, uh, fresh enough or whatever? You write what you want to write, and it it goes directly to our hearts. Whether like Irving Berlin with "What'll I Do" or "Count Your Blessings" or these unbelievably perfect songs in a way to me.
You know, I don't know if you remember this, but this was huge to me because you and Joe nicknamed me Irving.
Yeah,
You said, you know, this is you got that Irving Berlin vibe.
do.
And I always thought it was fabulous that the greatest Christmas songs ever written were written by a Jew.
That's right. That's
It's
right.
universally true. That's why it speaks to us.
Correct. And you've cornered the market on that as far as I'm concerned. And I hope you continue to write that way. And I think you probably can't help yourself. I think you always will. Um, let's. I want to also talk about why. Okay, so you talked about a lot about the journey of the arc. I want to talk about why I love it so much. I just give me a few minutes. I love how compact and clear the world of the storytelling is. And it starts with walking into the theater, and you discover when Noah comes out and addresses the audience, talking to them almost the way Tevye talks to God in a way to me, right? There's some similarity there. It's so beautiful. You know, Noah's wrestling with his own problems, with all that's going on. And who does he confide in? I guess the people that won't talk back, or the folks that won't talk back, the animals. And I thought that was genius, right? Because he needed to, and we get information, certainly storytelling wise, information gets out that way. But it's so much more important than that. This relationship between Noah and the animals, with all this going on with his family. I love that, and I loved what it allowed designers to do. And this is, I think, important for people to know about doing the show. There's so much opportunity for design that would never exist if it weren't for this beautiful writing. One is, and I remember one of the probably maybe the best sound design I've ever had for a show. I got to be careful what I say here, but Ryan Powers designed 7-point surround sound for this show. We had the band was this small band was rock and roll band was in the loft of the ark. It looked like a hay loft, right? They were completely silent. It was all like V drums and all that. Underneath the seats, Ryan had put little speakers, and above our heads of animal sounds, like the birds were chirping away in these. We had filled it with bird cages up above. You heard birds chirping above. You heard snakes hissing under your feet. You heard over there. You heard a lion growling. You know, all these animal sounds coming from all different directions to create the environment and make us believe in the audience that we are the animals. I don't know what animal I am right now, but I feel like I might be a snake because it's right next to me. It was brilliant. And of course, the rest of the sound was so gorgeous, but the entire theater was the ark, and we played every bit of the space.
And we had Beowulf Borat, who made that
Beowulf
incredible.
Borwick did the set. We had Lisa Zinni do the costumes, who's now a big, broad. I mean, both of them are like, Tony Award winners, nominees, So we had quite the team. Eric Haugen, my favorite lighting designer in the world in some respects, designed the lighting and the effects. And it was super simple, but it was beautifully designed. And I think the show itself gives creative designers an opportunity to do their thing and do it well, in a way that's economical. You don't just have to, spend gobs and gobs of money to make this work. The little things matter,
Yeah. And you did a great job. It was good. My great sadness was, why didn't we just have 7 cameras and just run it so that people who are going to try to stage it themselves get a sense of, oh, this is what that could feel like to be able to go and just see it.
I'd love to do it again. Let's figure out a place to do it again. I want to do it that way again someday. And I think this show should probably tour between you and me. I don't know if that's doable or not, but that, it's a show that, again, it's so universal. You probably the strongest we review that we got for that show was a New York Times reporter who was Jewish, writing for, at that point, she'd left the New York Times and was writing for a Jewish magazine or newspaper, and loved the show.
I
Totally.
remember that. I remember that. It was, she understood it. She really got it.
And the universality of it.
Yeah.
Right. That's why the show is so, and there were school groups that came and they just adored it. These, middle school kids and high school kids adored this show for all the reasons I think I adore it. But anyway, so what else can we talk about regarding? It's got a great. We've recorded the score. It's a beautiful score, and you can find that on our website and things like that. But what else is there about the ARC you'd like to share in terms of your many experiences with it, because you've seen it done all over the country?
And there have been, and it's really interesting, the difference between people who live in a culture that's not uncomfortable talking about the Bible story. I mean, after the thing with New York had happened, it was very disappointing. I got a phone call a year and a half, 2 years later from somebody who had seen your production in New York and went crazy. And they had this little tiny theater outside of Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And they said, we're going to do this, and we want you to come down, because they, they were from the same tribe religiously that I was, but it was not a Mormon-y thing, or just, there were 9 different churches that loved this theater so much that it was like Bible Belt Central. Baptists all bought their tickets over here. The Methodists were there. The Catholics loved this thing. We had a lot of Jews that came to see, loved the show. So they said, we want you to come and introduce. And I think maybe the best response to any line I have ever spoken on stage was when I got up and I greeted everyone. And I said, it is such a thrill for me to be here, because, the ARC kind of got crucified in New York. Pause. But it's been resurrected in Texas.
Yeah.
It went nuts.
Yeah.
Resurrected in Texas. And the other thing that was so cool is they did the show, and it was so fun to see people just embrace it the way you talked about so many. And then as we're leaving, they would say, I don't think those people in New York are as good as our people right here in Texas. In other words, I'm sure
they were very proud of what they created too.
And that's one of the things that I would like to end with, is that as a writer, one of my favorite lines that I just have embraced, I think I wrote it, is that sometimes a song can teach me the truth the only way my heart can hear it. And I used to think the most important thing was how much this show could affect an audience.
Yeah.
Until I had people who were in the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
And said, I got to sing those songs and they became part of me. Oh, what songwriter doesn't want to hear that?
It's my wife asks me all the time when I'm putting up a show. She goes, because I'm, I second guess myself, and is working all that kind of thing. And she goes, how are your actors feeling about it? I said, well, they love it. They really like it. And I'm like, she goes, that's all you need. They need to love it. That's what matters. And then the audience will too. Yeah. And I think that's the experience. And it's not, yes, we are doing it for the audience. That's the main reason. But we're also doing it for ourselves. We're doing it for the entire team that's working on the show, building it together. That's the beauty of what we do. It is a community. Yeah. And it's a metaphor, I think, for the way the world ought to work. Yeah, it's filled with like pettiness and this and that. But at the end of the day, the show gets up. And that's what we care about the most together.
And I think given the conditions that are manifest in just a very divided world and country and all that other stuff, we're a family and we got to sort this out. We got to figure this out. And it's
and you do it in the ARC. You do it in Forgotten Carols for sure, but you do it in the Ark.
Yeah.
Probably
More than
it's
anywhere
kind of
else.
what it's about. Yeah, it's what it is about, which is a thing I always loved and love about it still to this day. Can you
Well,
talk about
maybe
that? Can you talk about that in terms of what's going on in the world today? I think that's a worthy conversation.
I think it is too, because it matters to me that everybody knows how important it is to be seen and loved. And I just didn't understand when I was writing it. And I even look back on it, and Jeff and I have talked a lot about this. When he came out and he was Ham, he was I'm the prodigal son. I'm the guy that doesn't belong on this ark, and I'm bringing my partner on, and it turns out that the messages that need to be learned on that ark do not come through Noah. The fact that Noah, and I'm kind of representative of that, I'm the righteous Mormon guy. I'm the guy
The
who's,
patriarch.
yeah, I'm kind of the disgustingly goody two shoes guy. I've never had a beer. Lynn and I were virgins when we got married. Who identifies with me? I'm so odd. And yet I remember the time that Jeff and I were talking about that play, and nobody sings whenever he needs a miracle like my son. And when we get a chance to sing together and we do songs and we talk about his journey coming out into a very conservative religious tradition, and here's this guy who's kind of the Mormon Billy Joel kind of guy, how do they learn to hear each other? And one of the things we talked about, and I didn't see it because I wrote it in advance. I wrote the answer to how my son and I could get through 5 years of struggle and therapy, things I had to learn, ways I had to humble up. And what it was that the one thing that tied us together was the music. When we couldn't talk in any other language, Jeff and I could talk in songs. And
Beautiful.
he could teach me things about that song. And he said, Dad, you know that this lyric from this song before I came out was everything I wanted to say to you. And you wrote it. And now I'm singing it back to you saying, Dad, please hear it. Because you're the guy who made the most successful commercials, maybe in the history of the world, of families. And isn't it ironic that the guy that did the great give your children everything, give them your time, you weren't a very good dad to me. You never saw me. What? What? I took you all over the world and we'd sing together. He said, yeah, like I was the trained seal that just got up to make you look good. You never saw me. You know what you saw, Dad? You saw the stained glass version of me that you wanted to show off to the rest of the world. Look at what a wonderful guy I am. But I was afraid to show you who I was because I knew our tradition. I knew the way we talked about this issue growing up. I was afraid I'd lose your love. You wrote it all down in a play and you didn't even know that you were writing about you and me and my coming out.
Wow.
And there are other things that it's about. It's about all family dynamics, but the specific lyrics to the specific songs. And then I went through my entire catalog of songs. I mean, I got 45 albums of songs that I've written. They're not connected to musicals, just songs. And I didn't realize that every single song I have ever written, hundreds and hundreds of songs, was not ultimately about what I thought I was writing about.
It's so interesting you say that because I've been doing my little, research to get to, reintroduce myself to the Michael McLean I know all so well. So, but I'm getting reminded of that very thing, how these songs speak to me. And they're not really necessarily, I never thought they were really meant for me in a way, right? I didn't understand. Like I'm talking about your canon of songs beyond
Mhm.
the arc. The arc is a story that I delved into and could make sense of the whole thing. But to hear these songs that are just this song, this song, this song that are meant to be almost, pop songs in their way, or the Irving Berlin in you, right? Um, they speak to me, and I didn't know that they were intended to, if that makes any sense. But they do, big time. And then I got a chance to hear uh, the song translated into into Ukrainian,
Yes. Yes.
right? Into the
Hmm.
light. So that was astounding as well. I'm like, wow, this song has become important to them in their, and I just directed like, it was part of this evening of 8 brand new plays for Ukraine that were Ukrainian, written based on real Ukrainian stories. And I ran into this in that process, going like, wow. And they do need this song now more than ever, right? Or particularly when 2 years ago, when it was really in the midst of it had just really gotten difficult. Um, so your songs, again, it's that universality, and you're telling your truth, and whether your truth is because you're unveiling some of your soul, that maybe you didn't even know you were unveiling, is
No,
extraordinary.
it
That
is
is just
extraordinary.
extraordinary. That's being a real artist. That's what we're supposed to be doing, and you just do it. It's
That's right.
amazing.
I do have to say that after the show didn't get an opportunity to live longer in that sandbox in New York, and I've struggled with clinical depression for 60 years. I mean, I have to have meds to just be kind of on a level playing field with the rest of the world. It has been, I have had for so many years of my life a fundamental sense of unworthiness. I am not good. I am not, I'm just not good enough. And even people would give standing ovations after I had finished a one-man show version of the Forgotten Carols or whatever. And I honestly thought, man, they're really worried about traffic. They're standing up really fast and clapping because they got to get the hell out of here so they can go. But I could not, no, I'm serious. I couldn't process it as being gratitude for what I'd done because I saw everything I did as just completely inadequate. So when the arc, which I thought might be uh, an opportunity for me to, in my culture, there's a great line called to fill the measure of your creation. That's one of the things that we come to do as humans, to fill them. And I've always thought about it. I want to fill the measure of my creation with my work. But I measured it not in terms of, did I leave on this planet something unique to me that was true and authentic for me so that it would be here? It would be, well, did it get nominated for a Tony? Did it last 3 years like I Love You, or as many years as I Love You, You're Perfect? So the art failed and those songs failed. So my conclusion was, well, I've known this all along. I'm just not any good. I'm a failure. 40 years later, that song, Hold On, the Light Will Come, with the show that got crucified by the Times or whatever it was, comes back. And if I could speak directly to every person that's hearing this that is a writer and has stuff that they're just itching to find a way to communicate. I want to free you up from something that, oh my gosh, it took a near-death experience and a kidney transplant to figure this out. But the gift you give when you authentically say, this is the best I can do with the amount of talent that I have, but I want this to be left. But I don't want me to judge myself based on whether or not it was received the way I wanted it to be received. And I think the universe is so brilliant. And I think the divine connection between creativity and art, I think life would be intolerable without art. I think I'd learn nothing without art because it's the most precious thing that there is. And the fact that 40 years later, while I am so sick with kidney failure, I have 1 hour and 20 minutes a day, I'm even functional. And I had become friends with Viktor Yushchenko, the guy who was the president that led the Orange
Yeah.
Revolution. And I got to go to Ukraine after he was no longer, he'd been poisoned by the Russians and he was all disfigured, but he liked me enough. He wanted me to go to Kyiv to sing at his birthday party. Huge honor. And so I go there, I fall in love with Ukrainians, I feel them deeply, and then 40 years later, I read about this invasion, and I get this feeling. Remember that song that was such a horrible failure 40 years ago?
It wasn't a horrible failure, but it wasn't.
But it wasn't. It wasn't.
It wasn't. It was
And
beautiful.
so over 4 days, miracle upon miracle, I stumble across the runner-up to The Voice in Ukraine. Her brother-in-law lives an hour away from me here in Utah. I do a little recording. She's in a tent city in Warsaw because she's left as a refugee. And I said, I think this needs to be translated. Can you help me? And I hear you're a pretty great singer, and we have an opportunity. She sings it, sends it back to me, the recording. I couldn't produce it. I couldn't be in the studio. I didn't have the energy to do anything more than play it through once and go to bed. And then I see a like FaceTime video where it had just been recorded. She took a Bluetooth speaker out. No, somebody else did it for her. And there's tent cities of refugees from Ukraine, big, tough, burly, central casting Ukrainians. Tears, nowhere to live, lost everything. And in that language, she's singing Cheka Cheka.
Yeah.
Hold on, the light will come. And the former first lady of Ukraine is watching this and says to my friend who had coordinated it all, you know, I'm still friends with the owner of the largest broadcasting complex in Ukraine. We're getting this song to all of our people on Ukraine.
Wow.
Now, if I had a choice between the art turned out to be this fabulous hit and it ran for 10 years in New York, but never had an opportunity to be translated to the hearts of people that I loved in a foreign country, to give them just a smidgen of more hope that you're not alone, what would I pick?
Yeah, it's a very powerful story that is true. Beautiful story. And it's so you're absolutely right. And that does give us perspective. I one of the most important moments in my life was meeting Frank Capra when I was in high school. And he told a story about It's a Wonderful Life, the movie. It was his favorite movie he ever made, and it was a flop, basically a flop. Came out just after the war, and they thought this is a little too sentimental, right? We all know what a brilliant movie it is now, but nobody knew that movie in the 70s when I was in high school. And he gave a little lecture in a classroom with about, I don't know, 16 people sitting in a classroom. He sat on the desk in the front and talked about it. They showed the movie first. We were all weeping, having seen this movie we've never seen before. But he talked about how it upset him so much that this movie was not a hit. And then he said, but then I got letters. They had played it. They decided to play it at a prison for people on death row. And they did. And he received these letters saying, I thought my life was worthless. These prisoners, right? He said, and your movie let me know that even my life had value. So we think we're failures sometimes, when in fact, we are far from it as artists. And I think your story, telling your story to artists, other people that want to express themselves, whether it's singing or dancing or writing or composing, whatever that is, there's value in saying what you need to say. and delivering your truth. We need more and more of it, not less and less of it, for sure. And you're an example of it. And you're still writing and giving us these gifts, Michael. It's extraordinary. Thank you, Michael McLean, for joining us for this month's Miracle or Two, a monthly marquee spotlight. With an infectious score, emotional depth, and a creative singing concept that invites the audience into the story, The Ark is a perfect choice for theaters looking for something bold, heartfelt, and truly original. If you're interested in bringing The Ark to your stage, visit miracleor2.com